Today we're looking at the Titanic. Hello, welcome to the Daily Bellringer. Please don't forget to subscribe and take a look at the questions down in the description. Also, don't forget to check out dailybellringer.com where you'll find more resources that go with many of the Bellringer videos. The Titanic was once one of the grandest ships ever built. It was supposed to be unsinkable, but it met a tragic end on its maiden voyage. This maritime disaster, which claimed the lives of over 1,500 passengers, has fascinated historians and researchers for over a century. The RMS Titanic, RMS standing for Royal Mail Service, was a British passenger ship operated by the British White Star Line. It was constructed to compete with other luxury cruising ships that sailed out of England, such as the Lusitania. Construction on the Titanic began in March of 1909 in Belfast, Ireland, with over 3,000 workers dedicated to the project. After 2 years and 2 months of construction, the ship was completed, and on May 31st, 1911, it slipped into the waters of the Victoria Channel. At the time, it was the largest and most luxurious passenger ship on the sea. The Titanic measured approximately 882.5 feet long, 92 feet wide, and 175 feet tall. The ship could reach a top speed of 23 knots, which is about 26 miles per hour. It could carry 2,435 passengers along with 900 crew members for a total capacity of around 3,300. The Titanic was like a floating city with luxurious cabins, fancy restaurants, and even a swimming pool. It was the epitome of luxury and innovation, boasting the latest technology of its time. The Titanic set sail from Southampton, England on its maiden voyage across the Atlantic Ocean on April 10, 1912. After brief stops at ports in France and Ireland, the ship set course for New York City, carrying approximately 2,240 passengers and crew members. The passengers on board the Titanic were from all walks of life. There were wealthy and famous passengers such as John Jacob Astor and Isidore Straus, the owner of Macy's, who traveled in luxurious suites. Below deck in the lower decks were hundreds of immigrants seeking a new life in America. The first few days at sea went by without any events, but on the fourth day of the journey, tragedy struck. At approximately 11:40 p.m. on the night of April 14, 1912, the Titanic collided with an iceberg in the icy waters of the North Atlantic, ripping a gash about 300 feet long and puncturing a hole in the hull of the ship approximately 12 feet wide. The ship began to quickly take on water. The crew sounded the alarm and began evacuating the passengers. However, there weren't enough lifeboats for everyone on board. The Titanic could carry 64 lifeboats, but it only had 20, which could only hold about 1,100 passengers, and there were over 2,000 passengers on board. As the ship began to sink, panic ensued. Passengers rushed to the lifeboats, desperate to escape the sinking ship. Many of the lifeboats were not fully loaded before they escaped. Some on board showed incredible bravery, helping others onto the lifeboats before themselves. As the ship listed back and forth and eventually began to be pulled down almost perpendicular to the water, many panicked and fought for their own survival. The scene was chaotic and terrifying. People were crying out for help, families were torn apart, and some were diving into the icy waters, which were only 28 degrees. At that temperature, being in the water for only a few minutes, hypothermia set in and shortly after, death. At about 2:20 a.m. on the morning of April 15, 1912, the Titanic fully slipped under the icy waters of the North Atlantic. Fellow ship the Carpathia arrived on the scene after receiving the Titanic's distress call, but by that point there was little they could do. In the end, only 706 passengers survived the disaster. Over 1,500 people lost their lives to the sinking of the Titanic. The sinking of the Titanic led to significant changes in maritime safety regulations. Ships were required to have enough lifeboats for all passengers and crew, and new rules were implemented to ensure better communication and navigation at sea. The wreck of the Titanic was discovered in 1985, approximately 400 miles east of Newfoundland, beneath about 13,000 feet of water. It has been found that much of the ship is still intact, along with artifacts such as furniture, jewelry, and much of the ship's machinery. The sinking of the Titanic is a reminder of the importance of being prepared for emergencies. It teaches us that even the most seemingly invincible feats of engineering can be vulnerable to unforeseen circumstances. Its story continues to capture the imagination of people worldwide, reminding us of the lives lost and the lessons learned from this historic disaster. So with that, hopefully you learned something, and thanks for watching.